looked great. Maybe Chris Luganbuehl can comment after I do, but that's kind of where we left it. Quite a few fixtures were probably going to be targeted by this project, FS 0623, and so just delay a year. Okay, hopefully that's about it.
Thank you. Mr. Luganbuehl, do you have any comments? See your hand.
Yes, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yes, so I'm Chris Luganbuehl. I'm the president of the board of the Flagstaff Dark Skies Coalition. I wanted to thank the MetroPlan for bringing this forward and discussing this. I wanted to make a point, however, for all of our sake, but particularly for the state level representatives and maybe federal, that this is a concern of much broader constituency than just the observatories. These are policies regarding the spectrum of the lighting use for outdoor lighting, roadway lighting included, which have been in community.
You're frozen.
Yeah. Jason or anybody else online, can you still hear us?
Yeah, I can still hear you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe we could move on and then come back if Chris is able to get audio back, rejoin.
Sounds good. Any other comments from the public? I'm gonna just type in the chat that hopefully you can still read that.
Did he?
Maybe he's gonna try and join right real quick.
What a cliffhanger.
You can turn his camera up too if he comes back on.
Yeah.
That might have some bandwidth.
I'm not seeing him yet.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll send him an email too.
thank you.
I think we could have any discussion the TAC wants to have, and then if he is able to rejoin, allow them.
And I just wanted to make sure, did you have any comments?
I might add a little bit to it. My name is Dr. Fred Verba. Just retired from the Naval Observatory after 49 years. So,
Congratulations.
thank you. Appreciate it.
But who's counting?
But yes. So I've been working on street lighting issues and lighting, city lighting code and all that for probably about 2.5 decades, not as long as Chris has, not as short as Stephen has. The other thing I can add is, obviously our concern is after the test fixtures that were done that looked really good spectrally. We have a monthly telecon with ADOT folks, which we had last Thursday or Wednesday?
Last Thursday.
Last Thursday. And I think everything looked good from their standpoint. They were just wanting our kind of verbal approval that we really did understand what the spectrum looked like. And I asked Karim a little bit more about the scope of the project and all that. Everything, they were going to do all the intersections and street lighting and TIs in the area. So we went away from that meeting, really, really happy. And next thing we heard, it's been kicked down the road a bit. So that was a bit discouraging. So that's all I really have to add. But I think from my personal standpoint, while the design parameters for ADOT for the county and the city are really important. It's really nice to get the lights up as sort of the first step of getting into the study that Dave has talked about.
Thank you. And I see that Mr. Luganbuehl was able to join us. Thank you. We might suggest that you turn your camera off just in case that has anything to do with the finickiness of our IT in here. And if you want to restart, I don't think you had gotten very far when you froze. So if you just want to start from the top. And thank you for your patience with us.
Well, thank you for your patience. I did turn my camera off immediately upon the original failure, but it didn't seem to help. Are you hearing me all right now?
Yes.
All right, I was trying to make the point that the policies regarding the spectrum of outdoor lighting in Coconino County and Flagstaff had been in place for quite a long while, in excess of 30 years, adopted in 1989 at both city and county. These policies express much broader concerns than simply those of the observatories. That's the main point I wanted to underscore. This is a community value identified broadly of the protection of dark skies and the visibility of clear views of the sky at night. So I'm with the Flagstaff Dark Skies community, which is not affiliated with either observatories. So I wanted to make sure that the state and federal level folks, I know that the local folks already understand this, but the state ADOT and anybody, although I don't think we have any FHWA folks here today, are aware that this is a broad and high value community concern, that we move forward with this. I am very much concerned that by delaying it, we might get ourselves into trouble with budget problems, given the current activities at the federal level and the requirement likely of support of federal monies to move this project forward. And I also underscore Kate Morley's comments that if there are studies that need to be done, certainly we can study this stuff for a long time, but that doesn't mean that we can't study it more. There are plenty of local resources that are available that are expert in the field of a lot of the areas or a lot of the topics regarding the advantages, disadvantages, et cetera, of these kinds of lights. And I hope that those can be taken advantage of if appropriate. But at this point, we're kind of operating, so to speak, in the dark. We don't know what kinds of studies are needed or desired. So thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. See any more public comment, Jeff?
When you finish that first.
I was just gonna say, no public comment. We'll go on to discussion.
Yeah, from the city, I guess I'd offer just a couple of things from the city perspective. These fixtures that ADOT is testing and has tested, we did an initial test at the West Flag TI, then this one at Butler and Milton, do kind of come off of the informal approved products list of the city. So these are the exact same fixtures we're using, except a little more powerful. It's kind of really the difference. So that's good news for all of us. And that's kind of what's helped, I think, has helped ADOT at least initially go for these tests. It's like, oh, we've seen these on city streets. And then I want to just mention scope. You guys said all the lights, and everyone doesn't always understand what kind of the mixture of lights are in Flagstaff. So the city's responsible for all of the street lighting, even on ADOT routes that are outside of the traffic signals. So those are already covered for city code replacements, and that's ongoing. So what we're talking about here is all the ADOT traffic signals. ADOT's also including all the ramps, which is actually a significant amount of lighting on the approaches and exits to all the ramps and interchanges in town. And then kind of surprised me, they're also talking about the system TI, which is I-17 and I-40, which is the high mast lighting, the 100 and I don't know how tall they are, 100 and something feet tall. They're very tall. Very big. And that's really good news because that was an issue for us back in the 90s. Of what those high mast lights were gonna look like, whether we'd even have them. Chris, I know, was involved. Stephen wasn't. Fred was probably involved. Just a little bit. Yeah, and it's been 20 or 30 years probably since that discussion. So that's like huge at this point now to say, oh, ADOT's probably just gonna put in our dark sky compliant city lighting. So yeah, so this is a big deal. It's exciting when we get over the hump, which I think we're pretty close. That's all I got.
Any other comments or discussions? Oh,
I
sorry.
do. Obviously, I haven't been terribly involved with this process, but I know it's been ongoing for quite some time, right? I mean, these meetings have been going on, these discussions have been in the works, and this project has been in the works for a long time. But I think we remain committed to that discussion, conversation, and working through that. I can't, like I said, I can't speak to the study itself, but I think as it relates to dark skies and just lighting throughout this general corridor, I think we locally here for the ADOT district remain committed to that. I was able to gain access to my systems. And at this point, we are targeting a first quarter FY 26 advertisement. So it will advertise this summer. So it's not at this time anticipated to be a significant delay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim?
No, I'm just wondering if I need to go back to the rest of the agenda. Okay.
So that we're,
We're
that,
good on
that
that one.
discussion's good, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, much appreciated.
Okay, we're gonna go back to agenda item formerly 1, now 2. Draft fiscal year 2025 budget.
You're gonna do that every time?
I'm gonna do it once. I just realized I don't want to set that precedent.
Well, I'm gonna start off by saying there's a mistake on the agenda. I'm just realizing, which this is the draft FY 26 budget, not the 25 budget. But the information will be the same. Hopefully it's right in the other places. So I'm gonna be quick here and then tie this to the UPWP, but the short and sweet of it is that salaries and employee related expenses are projected to go up 4% next year. That's essentially related to longevity raises that were part of the Mountain Line payroll system. So they do a 3% longevity raise every year, and then additional adjustments for a new compensation study that has some recommendations in it. So 4% increase there. Operating has a large decrease, and that's because in the FY 25 budget, we had a $100,000 commitment to move into the DCC for tenant improvements. So we'll have met that obligation before the end of the fiscal year. We've also decreased the public outreach budget a fair bit, and that's related to, we haven't been spending all the money, so we're just right sizing that essentially. Travel and training is also reduced. We had a grant that has been providing assistance with going to the National Association of City Transportation Officials. That grant will be fully expended, and so we're removing that portion from the travel budget. And then finally, projects is the fourth category of our budget. And really the summary here is that we don't have anything new. We're just trying to continue and wrap up the many things that we have underway. So as we talk about the UPWP, you'll see that theme as well of it's really continuing what we've already started and not adding new. Next slide. So this gives you a breakdown of how the money is spent in those 4 categories with total expenditures at 2.3 million for the year. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, there is a budget table there if you want to. We do project 5 years out. And so you can see the most important part is the year-end fund balance at the end of FY 23 is above 0. It's at $200,000. So that shows that we're sustainable through that period of time, which is our typical projection. Now I'm happy to answer any question. Yeah. That's right, Chair.
Can you go back one
Yeah.
table? Why does the estimate for formula grants go down?
Yeah, in my long-term assumption, I don't assume that we get formula grants, not competitive grants.
Yeah, formula grants.
It's the way we're spending the money. The formula is staying pretty stable, but because revenue comes as reimbursement to us, it's also a little bit tied to the expenditures. Yeah.
Did you make an assumption about the CRP in those formula funds?
Yeah, in the formula, that is true. In formula funds and FY 28, the carbon reduction program drops out because I assumed that the reauthorization of the surface transportation bill would not continue that program.
Okay.
Yeah.
A quick question too, why does the salary go up in 27, then it drops in 28, then you have that, it looks like just inflation? That's you? Yeah, that's you.
That is Dave's retirement.
You're not gonna hire, but you're not gonna leave a slot for anybody?
Uh, Dave has a generous, old package from the city for sick leave and other time off.
Generous. It's industry standard.
But does that account, that's a good question. Does it account for a new employee or is it that generous?
No, it doesn't account for the replacement of Dave at this point, yeah.
He's irreplaceable.
He's irreplaceable.
Irreplaceable.
Let the record show.
Hey, good for you.
Any questions or comments from anyone online? Move on to item 3, which is the draft 2026-27 Unified Planning Work Program.
Great, so this is really closely tied to the budget. Next slide. If you recall, the Unified Planning Work Program is really a 2-year work program that ADOT and FHWA want to see about how we're going to spend, particularly the formula funds, but any other funds that we have at the organization, and ensure that we meet all of our federal obligations by spending those funds. Next slide. So we do this every 2 years, and we do more minor updates in between. And so on this slide is a long laundry list of the things that have changed. We update who's on the team, including our committees. We update our budget tables. We've removed a couple projects that are already done or that our commitment to is complete, such as the downtown mile. Mountain Line's no longer pursuing the bus rapid transit, so these things have been removed. We have new projects added to recognize the Safe Streets Master Plan, the Vulnerable Roadway User Study, and some of those competitive grants that we've received. We did add the research grant that we got for NAU's Crank tool, which is about bike access. Though that is a grant that we haven't heard any information on and is kind of just sitting out there unobligated at this point. It is very bike focused, so we're not sure what will happen to that. There's a section that identifies the partners we work closely with, and we added FUSD in recognition of the Safe Routes to School program and the National Forest, which we've been working on some trail stuff with, including some grant applications. We included some other items such as our audit, oversight of grantees, portions of that administration work that we do that weren't previously recognized, as well as just recognizing there are portions of the UPWP that want us to talk about capital and environmental tasks. We don't have any of that planned in the next 2 years, no major capital expenditures or NEPA type studies, NEPA work. Next slide. We also made a couple suggestions for administrative amendments because there are updates that need to go to FHWA, and currently we're having to go back to the board for them, such as if our board TAC or management membership changes, we just want to be able to update those without going back to the board. And then same, if the board already approves a budget change, we want to be able to therefore modify the UPWP with the approved budget. So allowing us to make those changes without board approval. And that's the end of my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Stop.
I don't see any questions. Great. Great presentation. All right. Item 4, Safe Streets Master Plan update. Dave?
Thank you. Next slide. So we are working diligently on this grant. Just a little bit of background. Safe Streets and Roads for All, $2.14 million. A little more than $500,000 from the city with some additional funding from Mountain Line and the county. 4 years, 5 years, clock ticking from December when the grant agreement was signed. So upon signature, it's obligated, so we feel pretty confident this money's going to flow. So where do we actually stand now? We've had several scoping team meetings. I want to thank Michelle and Jeff for their participation on those. And maybe this Friday, we'll wrap that up, fingers crossed. And should we do that, we'll circulate it to the full stakeholder list. You might recall that we interviewed about 30 people in preparation for the scope, and we want to send that back out to them. As far as a deliverables document, that would be associated with procurement. I'm going to say we're about 60 to 70% complete. That's where we're going to be shifting our focus as a team. And there are questions as to, as you'll see maybe in the next slide, whether we go with a request for proposal, which is the direction we have been leaning, which would require a much more detailed scope, or if we might go for a request for statement qualifications, which we can, for which we could be a little more broad, and then perhaps learn more. We put out a notice of intent to release, and so far we have 22 firms that have submitted their names as interested in the project. And we've been updating that list every Friday. When we update it this Friday, we will also update that notice of intent to release. And we'll probably be doing this in May, because I don't think we're going to hit the April deadline originally hoped for. And as a project manager, co-project manager with Chris Fair at the city, I'm comfortable with that. You know, let's go slow to go fast. Let's make sure that we're comfortable with this. So next slide, please. So some of the major scope features, and I would invite both Michelle and Jeff to add any comment to this, but complete streets guidance is a initial component, really strong emphasis on context and functional classification, but also addressing intersections, parking, fire service, and maintenance, along with other things to be incorporated in there. Master plan relationship to other plans be clearly established. We've had a lot of discussion how it ties into the active transportation master plan or the carbon neutrality plan, the MetroPlan regional transportation plan. And just to make sure that those and the process for updating and integrating those going forward is clearly understood. And that master plan will be informed by both the complete streets guidance and a series of performance metrics. We have code and policy revisions, and the introduction of policy is a revision to that revision, those revisions. The idea that as we get deeper into the master plan, there may be elements of the regional plan or other policies that really need to be revisited. And so we wanted to open the door to that. This will build on the work of the last cap. I've recently had the opportunity to review the transit section. Excellent, very good work. And I think, you know, as we look to what the city might take on independently and what leaves here, there's room for that. And then also improving the traffic impact analysis process. As we go through this and we incorporate new things like the complete street guidance, how all that works. Also a strong emphasis on costs and funding, and that includes operations and maintenance, and trying to get a better handle on private funding that might be reasonably expected, as well as a sense of when we might exceed the capacity of private funding, which then of course has implications on whether on public funding and project delivery. Trying to have some jurisdictional sensitivity. This is city-centric, not only because of the size of the match they're putting in, but also because of the nature of the region. And so this would be really policy. Is it a point I skipped earlier? This would be city and state-specific plan requirements would be met. So, city adoption clearly for that. And then other aspects would be advisory to county mountain line. And then this last phrase, I just want to hit on a little bit. We did have a good discussion at our last meeting about having deference to ADOT policies and not pursuing route transfers. I personally, as project manager, am interested in elevating this. My understanding is the concern is it could be a distraction, time and money, both time and money distraction. On the other hand, having been through things like the Milton study, I know that it creates a lot of complications for system planning and site planning. And with the size of the budget and the time we have, this seems like an opportunity to address this. And so, we want to have conversations. That the scoping team is doing a great job, but would like to elevate this to see if, now is the time to have these discussions within this context. So I'm going to kind of let that hang for a moment and see if there's any comments or reactions to that. I'm not hearing any, so I'll just say, in closing on that topic, I think there's a number of ways that we can address that. One, it'd be including that we need, at some time, if we're not making significant progress, we need to cut it loose. Would be one thing that we can do. And, another thing, would just be maybe at a very high policy level. It's like, who's best suited to handle these roads? And if it's, the city, we'll head down one path. If it's ADOT, we head down another. And, at least we have that behind us. So I think there's levels that we can address and safeguards to put in place that would just not put the larger project at risk.
I think my concern about doing the transfers, that everything I always hear is that to have that conversation, we have to understand the cost.
And we do.
And so that seems like that would be a big portion of the study. And so I like the idea, I guess just what you just said of offering the high level policy sounds more in line, because then we've kind of created that framework for the system and what those roadways would look like. And that would give a better idea to
Right.
then look at the maintenance costs. And so then we can have a more informed conversation. So I don't know.
So by way of background, Madam Chair, a fairly significant study was done back in around 2008, 2010, and then we updated that a couple years ago. So there is a good handle on a number of aspects, pros and cons to each agency, costs, future capital. All of that's done, and it's really about, well, how do we handle the finances? And I think, and that larger policy question was never fully addressed or directly addressed in this. And so, I think we are in a good position to have to continue this conversation in the next step. And if a transfer takes 10 years, it takes 10 years, if that's what it's needed, and if that's what's desired. So I think those are the conversations I think would be beneficial, and I think would be useful, as I said in the scoping team meetings, if we get that resolved. It's like, and right now it's like, don't, I'm exaggerating here, don't touch the ADOT roads. Well, then we can plan for that. But if we really think it's best that it's transferred to city, then we can plan for that. So, okay, next slide, please.
Yeah. I'll just add real quick to it. When I read the deference to ADOT policy, I asked Dave about it, and my initial reaction to it was, well, in this plan, part of our goal is to update standards, and we're not deferring, we're not using standards as a starting point, right? We're doing it more of, it's not a full visioning, but we're starting with what we want and then figuring out what needs to change to get there. And I think turnbacks are one of those solutions, but ADOT does have a process by which we can ask them to reconsider standards. We could also, it doesn't necessarily, to defer to their policies also eliminates potentially asking them to consider a modification to a standard as an organization or a change. And I'm not weighing in on the likelihood of that, but I think there are more solutions in our toolkit maybe than just turnbacks. So.
think just to add to that, I think from an ADOT perspective, certainly we're willing to have that conversation around route transfers and so on. And those would obviously have to be specific to the routes and the, what specific areas we're talking about. And of course, to your earlier point, timing really is critical, right? I mean, the things that need to be in place to allow for that to be possible, both on our side and in the city side or whoever that accepting agency would be. There's some timing considerations that go along with that.
Very serious, yeah. Okay. So, next slide, please. So what's coming? We need to decide request for proposal, request for qualifications. This next bullet, probably another decision in there that is, do we need a policy advisor? Because there is going to be a lot of policy questions. And I think just on the funding side, a lot of hard questions that might be better handled by, a very good policy level facilitator. If we reach that decision that we do, then the question is this an independent advisor or embedded within a consulting team? We've had discussions, but not very in depth yet about oversight committee structures. We do know, as I mentioned, Chris, Farah, and I are co-managers, but who's going to sit on a larger oversight team throughout the process? A proposal review team hasn't been set up yet. We have introduced a menu of evaluation criteria, but haven't really weighed in on that yet either. And then the schedule, we're hoping for a May release, give a pretty healthy amount of time for a submittal, and then, like a month for review and interviews, and then a September award. And that award would be made by our executive board. So that's what I have on the master plan, and would be happy to answer any questions.
Do you think a month for review is enough? If we've had 22 firms show interest, I feel like we could, even if we get 5 or 6 responses, that's going to be a lot for a project of this magnitude, and trying to schedule people that review. I'm just wondering if we don't give that 2 months.
That's a fair question. If we get this out in May and give people, maybe we could probably move the review period starting into mid-July.
Yeah,
Give them mid-July for a return. Then give us 6 weeks for review.
yeah.
Are you gonna limit the number of pages?
So 1-page brief is what we're gonna ask for.
Then that, because I suspect we're gonna do interviews as well. I mean,
Yeah.
with this kind of a project, you're gonna be, 6 weeks is gonna be tight even, but
Yeah.
I don't think
No,
it.
it's a yes to limiting pages. And I think the other thing that we might really want to consider, sometimes you do references before interviews and sometimes you do references after. It might be a little more expeditious to do them before interviews, make a few calls and see if that would shortlist that a little bit further. So those are the kind of questions that we still need to work through. We'll be continue to work with the scoping team. I'm sorry, Nate's sitting our scoping team well as well. My apologies.
So the MetroPlan board will have to approve the contract?
Yeah.
And they have a break in the summer?
Yep.
So then you'll have to
Yeah, count for that.
count for
Yeah.
that too.
Well, that's why the September award. That's why the September award.
Okay. Will that come to TAC?
Yes, we'll have the TAC, and
The TAC is, if we want it to come to the TAC September, October.
so it might be an early October award by the board if we go through TAC. Yeah, and there's probably some good reason to present findings to the TAC because part of the technical review will be coming back through the TAC. So, if they want to blame us for the selection, we want their fingerprints on the knife. So, all right.
Those first 5 bullets are things that still need to be worked out.
Yes.
And who's working on
Yeah,
that?
so the scoping team, I think is gonna be the ones we're gonna look to weigh in on those.
So it's group I involved in every other Friday. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
That is the scoping team. Yeah.
Just making sure I understand
Yeah.
different groups.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll just say that's a lot of work to get done. 2 meetings between now and May.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we don't have the scope quite buttoned up. I don't know. I think we're close.
Yeah.
I haven't reviewed it.
Yeah.
At one time now. That feels aggressive for May, but
Were you looking for
you'll adjust.
feedback from the TAC on whether it should be an RFP versus an RSQ?
If people want to weigh in on that, and I'll kind of look to, how are we doing on time?
We should probably wrap this up in the next couple minutes, but yeah, I'm open to, we've had lots of pros and cons discussions on
Yeah,
these options.
One thing that, when we did ours through RFQ, mainly because it was civil engineering firms that we were expecting to
Mhm.
apply for it, and you have to do RFQs for engineering services. But what that also gave us the opportunity to do was, once we selected a qualified candidate, we were able to sit down and have a scoping meeting and say, hey, look at our scope. Is there anything that you recommend that we
Mhm.
add to it or take it away from it or change it around a little bit, to get into a better scope? And I think that can be helpful, especially when you get a firm that's maybe done 5 or 6 of these. They have a lot of lessons learned. But, and when we've only done, 1 or 2 projects of this nature in the region, they might have some good ideas that we can implement.
So Madam Chair, if I may, so one of the concerns is like, well, we know what our budget is. And, you start with an RSOQ and then you end up negotiating away your scope to meet a budget. Do you run into any of,
Well, let's see.
no, you see, you haven't gotten into negotiations yet. Okay,
Right, yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
I appreciate that feedback.
But yeah, that's a valid concern for sure.
Other, oh, thank you.
thank you. All right, we are on item 5, micromobility share program update, Ms. Austin.
Thank you, Chair McNulty and members of the TAC. I'm gonna blow through this pretty quickly. So if there's something that you need me to stop, I'm just gonna kind of quickly run through most of these until we get to the risks. So this is a brief presentation of what we've been giving to our stakeholders. Why are we giving this? Because the current code allows micromobility vendors to obtain a permit, but there's no permit process. Just a reminder, we went to City Council in February and they directed us to work on engagement with stakeholders. And so we're doing it. Okay, recap, quick history. In 2018, we had a spin pilot for bike share. And then in 2020, the gotcha that didn't happen because of the pandemic. Okay, so quickly, this is just a quick snapshot of the spin pilot. This is just, it was a 6-month pilot and it was definitely successful. Let's see, quickly, micromobility. I'm not just talking about bike share. We're talking e-scooters and e-bikes, right? Short-term, publicly available in the right of way. Why, right? They help with the climate action goals. It's more of an active transportation. It's a little more physical than in your car. Reduced single occupancy vehicle trips. It's affordable for some people who don't own a car. So it provides transportation equity. And of course, it's a fun way to cruise around a new town. They don't take a lot of parking. So how it's supported, it's in the following documents. It's listed. These are the most specific policies from the feasibility study about why we would benefit from a shared micromobility program. This map is from Mountain Line, and it's a map of their service area. And the areas in that reddish brown color are areas with increased service requests. but the road network is not conducive to meeting those requests. So these are areas where micromobility could absolutely support transit. And if you notice, those areas are very similar to this map as well, where we saw increased ridership from the pilot. So sorry about that. I didn't want to duplicate the slides. All right. Okay, so in our peer city research, the image on the right shows the cities that we researched. If you notice, most of the cities with the similar population to Flagstaff only have about 200, 250 active devices at one time, and that's what this graph shows. As far as just kind of a synopsis on city investment in our research, there are different financial agreements with the different cities, but most cities are paid back in some way through these vendors. And then as far as staff time, most have some sort of staff time that are dedicated to the success of this program. And also I did want to point out, with the number of active devices, 75% of those are e-scooters and probably only 25%, this is an average, are e-bikes. So just making sure everyone knows that. Here is a map of North America on the right that shows cities with micromobility systems. And then on the left, these are the current shared micromobility programs in these 7 cities within Arizona. Okay, so now I can slow down a minute and take a breath. All right, risk. Okay, so these next few slides are definitely risks that we deemed a little more high impact. And so we took a little bit more time in developing some strategies on how we could mitigate them. So personal injury, right? Of course, it's very important to consider. Some options for mitigating this risk would be obviously waivers for users, contract liability for vendors, safety features on the devices, encouraging helmet use, and education. But there are some of these risks with personal injury have to be assumed because we can't account for humans and their behavior and how they ride on these devices. Hopefully the education would help with that, but this might be a place where some risk is assumed. Parking, right? Of course, it's important. We don't want any of these devices parked on the sidewalks, parked in the roadway, limiting ADA access to buildings, anything like that. So maybe some ideas for parking would be to develop a parking plan. And that might include incentivizing proper parking, which rather than penalizing people. I always like that positive approach. They don't take up a lot of space, as you can see, right? There's a lot of devices that can be placed in one parking spot. So that's always good. And then geofencing, which is a technology that we didn't have last time. And it's a digital tool that controls the devices, and you can control where they're ridden or parked, and they may not turn off in the area that you want to put it if you're not in the correct parking location. So I think that's something that would be really important. Maybe having the vendors provide additional racks so that we don't take away from people using existing bike racks. Okay, so staff time. Definitely something to consider because someone would be needed to manage comments, complaints, and communicate with the vendor. So I think another way to mitigate this risk would be, outreach and try to put a positive spin on it. Try and really be intentional and definitely just try to get back to the complaints and be timely on that. And then put as much responsibility on the vendor as possible. Public perception. I think when you have public perception and changing people's minds, it needs a multifaceted approach to highlight the benefits of the program, but also addressing concerns. And so that would be something, maybe a positive marketing campaign. We all know I'm all for that. But just being very responsive and being open to communication. And then making sure the devices are in good shape and working and they're not broken down and the whole shebang. Bike ordinances. There are some tough spots in our infrastructure, right? The image on the right is our current code where they can and cannot be ridden. So maybe updating the code might be something that needs to occur. And then of course the geofencing so that we know clear guidance on where they're to be ridden and not. Educate and, you know, give those incentives where we can when compliance is good. Okay, so these are just a couple medium risk impacts that we just wanted to mention. Devices taking over existing racks, we sort of discussed that earlier. Maybe some updates on sign code. Company viability would be in the event the company goes under. So protecting the city so that they're not liable for all these devices, although they would be owned by the vendor, but we don't want them laying around. And then of course, weak points in the infrastructure, and we are working on correcting that now with all of our wonderful infrastructure that's coming. Equity, this is the last risk. Always have to take this into consideration. Making sure that there's equitable distribution of the devices. In speaking with county, they, jails, maybe the hospital, maybe the building on King Street would be places that devices would need to be located. And then of course, in those areas to support transit and maybe downtown will people be using them for like quick trips in between work and those kinds of things. This is where we are. We're in engagement. After we finish, we are going to build a recommendation, return to city council, and then from there, receive direction whether it's a permit process or, and fix that, or if there's a RFP, which would need one vendor, the permit could mean multiple vendors, and then go through the process from there. This is who we've been talking to. And we've been asking all the committees and commissions, what are their initial reactions? Any special considerations that we need to incorporate if we do, or through this procurement process, if we do, or the permitting process, and what steps the city could take to ensure equitable access. Most of the feedback so far has been favorable. A couple items would be addressing infrastructure, including both e-scooters and e-bikes, so not just having e-bike or e-scooters. Yeah. And then making sure there is transportation equity, but not being too restrictive to find a balance, which way we go. There is it was supposed to be on Earth Day, but Earth Day was canceled. So I think it's going to be on Connect Flagstaff soon, if not already. And this is the team. Okay. I tried to make up some time. Any questions? Thank you so much.
On some of the commission and outreach meetings I've seen, the committees were asked about, do we limit it to like one company, or is it kind of like whoever wants to come can apply? What's been the overall feedback?
So we changed the question.
Okay.
I'm going to be completely honest. That was an original question, but then we figured that the team should be, once we get the feedback, the team should decide from the feedback. It was mixed.
Yeah, I know.
It was mixed.
The ones I saw was kind of mixed, so I was just curious if I missed a couple of it.
It definitely was mixed, but we quit asking the question. Thank you for pointing that out.
I think when the team makes that consideration about, is it one firm or is it everybody, you really have to think about the compliance that goes in with that, because compliance is going to be a nightmare. And I think that is something that you don't have that's not in this, that's highlighted as, I think, a risk and a challenge. of identifying who does do this compliance and what does that look like and how do we, that needs to be part of the education too.
Mhm.
Because code compliance will get the calls and they might not be the right people. I don't know if this actually falls under flag PD. I don't know actually who this falls under, but I want to be supportive of it, but I see some nightmare situations happening without a lot of forefront, and that's why I gave you Reggie Eccleston's contact.
Right, and so, yeah, so right now I'm working on, we want to talk to the vendors to ask them some pointed questions. How do they deal with some of these issues? And so, I'm very interested to learn how they tackle, because this isn't, we're not the only people asking these questions, and I do think that when we get there, the first few months, it's gonna be probably a little more rough, but I think once we weather that and figure it out, but I would like to know how other cities handle this as
Yeah.
well. And so I want to hear it from the vendors. He did deny all of my doodle poll, but that's okay. We'll get the information there.
And I would not just take the vendors' words for it, I would reach
No,
out
no,
to the
no.
communities that are using them and
Absolutely.
talk to their city staff and their.
We have talked to some, definitely.
Good.
Yeah,
So I think clearly there are gonna be some code updates needed, right? It looks like we've got e-scooters that are about the only thing not allowed on sidewalks, which if you've walked around, we've all seen what's mostly on our sidewalks these days. And I think I would just echo what Chair McNulty said was, like the enforcement and so on is gonna be key, and getting buy-in from those groups that are gonna be tasked with that enforcement is gonna be key as well, whether that's PD or code compliance or
Or some other entity.
Talking about scooters or cinders on the sidewalks.
separate topics.
Sisters are equally dangerous.
I'm gonna sneak that in there.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And okay, we're on item 6, the West Route 66 operational assessment update. Mandia.
Thank you, Chair, members of the TAC. So today's presentation is going to come to you in two parts. The first part, I'm going to give you just an overview of what the PAG has been working on and our preliminary recommendations that came out of our last workshop. And then the second part is I actually have some questions for you all to help inform the PAG as we move into our next workshop in May. So before I get started, just wanted to, it's been a while since we talked about this. Wanted to remind folks of this project. So MetroPlan was requested by the city to look at this corridor to help identify any potential transportation improvements in relation to the growth that is anticipated and currently happening along the roadway. Our goal is to really look at both the current and future needs of that demand while thoughtfully applying, the taxpayers' funds to these potential projects. Next slide, please. All right, so jumping into our PAG. So we had a successful workshop in April, had a great group. Everybody was in person, so lots of good conversation. And the main focus of that workshop was for the PAG to identify projects that would respond to both current and future needs. And the goal was to create fiscally constrained options. And then, of course, there were ongoing discussions with that around funding opportunities and the prioritization of investments, with the final goal of us, creating these packages. So before we started this workshop, we did provide some reminders to the PAG of things that we learned throughout this process. And I'll just go through those with you so that way these make sense as we move into some of the preliminary recommendations. So the reminders. During the modeling, all scenarios and those hybrids, except for the connectivity analysis, which is the item that we all deemed was out of scope for this project, performed very similar. So nothing really rose to the top as an ideal solution. The PAG agreed to use the regional plan scenario E. We added 35%, so that's called E+. That was really to account for any growth along the corridor. Obviously, we were dealing with a lot of unknowns. So just anticipating if it goes beyond what's currently in scenario E. All the model outputs inevitably showed gridlock along the corridor. I don't know if that's a surprise, but, and really what that's coming from is from both the modeling and our PAG members discussed is it's the Milton 66 interchange. Like until that gets reviewed, adjusted, however, 66 is just going to continually back up because of there. And of course, you know, we provided some more information on, or reminders, I should say, about public input that we received. You know, there is that need and desire from the community for bike and ped infrastructure. There were a lot of comments around intersection improvements, particularly around Thompson and Northwestern. So just kind of keeping our PAG members with these reminders. We moved into our workshop. We actually had 2 groups that were separate. They had cost cards to go through the map, and we'll go ahead and go to the next slide and I'll walk you through that. All right, so we are looking at this corridor across 4 different segments. And we chose to do that as a group because there's very different land uses out there and potential for development. So just kind of helped us look at it with a little bit more focus once we're starting to get into those recommendations. So what you're seeing here, and there's a zoom in on the next one, but essentially what you're seeing here is a combination of the 2 sets of recommendations that came from the PAG. Mostly landing in what we're calling segment 3. And I'll go ahead and skip to the next one. It'll be just easier for everyone to see. So essentially we were looking at signals for 3 intersections at Thompson, Railroad Springs, and Woody Mountain. Part of that conversation was based on available funding. Obviously, a roundabout is substantially more expensive than a signal. So trying to think about cost, or I guess that fiscally constrained component. The blue represents an asphalt foots we're saying the south side, although there was some conversation about maybe it belongs on the north side, but that's a different part of a study, not part of this one, but at least we can see that there is agreement that that would be a great connection for people biking and walking, and asphalt is cheaper than concrete and it allows for additional improvements to be made in the future when development comes in. Let's see, we have an addition of a foots trail in concrete from Woodlands Village to Yale. This is just to provide better connectivity for those bikes and peds to get towards NAU without being directly on West Route 66 at that point. We have a widening section with a taper. So as you know, we have some widening about right here, then it tapers in. So assuming that, you know, a light is the direction that they're going, continuing through and then tapering at Railroad Springs. Some other conversations, and I'll kind of point out our spreadsheet up here, because we had a lot of consensus throughout all these. The only 2 differences mainly were this concrete foots and about bus pullouts. We wanted to take the bus pullouts and specifically this RFB recommendation and kind of put those in our back pocket. You know, those are things that we have a cost for. We know what we need to invest in, but ultimately at the end of the day, that's really up to ADOT to ensure that, you know, it's meeting standards, it's approved, et cetera. So this is kind of the overall of the current recommendations. As you see, we are just a little over $11 million for everything everybody wants. Next slide. All right, so taking what we did in that first workshop, the second part of this workshop coming up on May 5th is really to talk about those recommendations and how we can phase those investments. We're going to have more conversations on leveraging grants and of course any development fees. We would like to have more conversations on roundabouts versus signals. We received some information today from NAU that might be helpful in that conversation. And then we also want to review other recommendations that have come out through this process. So, you know, we've talked about access management and connectivity in the past. There's probably, well, there is opportunities with the Safe Streets Master Plan of what that can do to influence this corridor as well. All right, so that was the PAG update. And if you don't mind going to the next slide, thank you. All right, discussion time, questions and answers. With what I showed you at these preliminary recommendations, I just wanted to get a feel if there were any concerns, challenges, or opportunities that we aren't seeing that we should discuss with this advisory group.
I have a question on the presentation.
Oh, yeah.
So it looks like the total amount of the wish list was 11 million plus. What budget do we have? What actually budget is there?
So there's the 11 million and 419.
Okay, so the total price tag for the improvements would be 11 million, but there's also 11 million and 419.
Yeah, that was the budget, that the fiscal
Okay.
constraint she referenced,
Oh.
there's like 10.8 million in 419 and about $300,000 in outstanding developer contributions. So that was the budget people were given to.
When you say
work.
outstanding developer applications, are you talking about development agreements that we
Agreements,
have
yeah,
that are committed funds to something? Okay, specific, okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
so,
money from Live Timber
Right,
Sky,
but that's for
Timber
this
Sky,
specific-
Live Timber Sky has to give a little bit.
yeah, okay, just making sure I understood that. Thanks.
Any concerns with the direction the PAG is going? Things we should bring to their attention, I guess, for consideration at our next meeting. All right, okay, obviously we had at the PAG, a conversation over roundabouts and signals. Signals are more affordable, roundabouts safer. And knowing that the city doesn't have a specific policy, I was curious if there was a preference from the city for us to look at one versus the other. The second part to that question is, we had a really good conversation about, could we install a signal and maybe in 10 years or so, pull it out and put in a roundabout? Whether that's politically or publicly acceptable, that I don't know. So just wanted to kind of open that up for conversation and thoughts.
I guess without seeing a map, this is a really hard question because of the right of way that's necessary for a roundabout, which is much more substantial than an intersection, and we haven't developed areas, and that will deem a lot of those adjacent properties probably undevelopable because you'll need so much right of way. And so I think politically and financially and realistically, I think it's signals. That's just my gut without looking at anything. I don't know. I would defer to Paul and Jeff though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Jeff, has there been, and Jeremy, have there been conversations about who eventually owns and operates the intersections? ADOT, I'm assuming?
The way it's set up today would be ADOT.
Yeah.
I mean, I know, Mandia, you've been through this with that PAG group. I think ADOT is in support of roundabouts through this corridor. And in general, I mean, they're implementing a lot of roundabouts.
And long-term maintenance is probably easier. Yeah, there's pros and cons, right? There's different types.
Of course, yes, we
Yeah.
could spend all day talking
Yeah.
pros and cons.
I'll throw out a couple things that we have learned.
Okay, yes, please, thank
Chair,
you.
from many of you, very, fairly preliminary. So they ran, we had talked about, we're modeling the regional plan 2045. But, we came to recognize that there's still a lot of development potential within the corridor and that will feed into the corridor. And so we said, well, let's do a 35% growth, which was the upper limit of the other scenarios that we looked at. When they ran that within the micro simulation model, it locked up the network. And this was a network from, basically Humphreys to I-40, and I-40 all the way out to I-40. And so they took a 5% incremental growth. I won't go, 5% steps. I won't go into the details, but what they're finding is that about 25% over existing growth, we're starting to lock up West 66. We're getting queues back from Wilton all the way back to Woodlands Village, taking 10 cycles. And so they ran that with signals at Woody Mountain and Thompson, and with roundabouts at the two. Again, preliminary, they're operating about the same, as far as we can tell. The some of the questions that remain that really can't be answered by the analysis that we have done or have budgeted is, if we need a signal at Railroad Springs, I, all through the conversation with NAU, I was calling it Railroad Springs.
Yeah, the IPA.
Yeah, would it operate? Would you queue back into the roundabout and lock up the roundabout just with the queues at Railroad Springs? And so where roundabouts, generally speaking, better capacity, better safety. At some point with saturation, you end up with some issues. And one of the things that came up at the PAG was, well, we do access management and people can just, turn right out of Railroad Springs or turn right out of Northwestern, go do a U-turn at the roundabout. Well, that's, for Railroad Springs, that's a mile out of direction to do that. So a lot of implications for how to manage intersection control within this corridor, which may have implications for phasing in terms of how much more time is needed to evaluate those. We're going to draw some more conclusions such as we can from the analysis done. But I think it's much more detailed than you would normally get at 15%. What we're trying to do. It's just because it's just that nuanced. So, I'm sure. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, moving on to the next item. Are there any concerns over the foots consideration on the south side? I know we have it as SGP, Strategic Grants Plan. Yes, it's in there, correct? Or no, in the, go ahead. I'm so sorry. I'm blanking out on where that is. There's the planning and design funds that have been set aside by the city for the south side foots. Thank you, sorry. I was like funding person. So, we have that identified in documentation. But I guess really my question here is in terms of 419 funds for supporting that. Is there anything that we need to bring back to the PAG in relation to that? And anything else you can think of, Dave?
What's the design funds?
It's just generically
Generically,
West 66. It's not,
but it says foots.
does it say West 66 foots in the CIP? I'm sorry, I did not understand
I'm
that.
so sorry. I can't recall.
I think it was just generically West.
Or if it was put into the strategic grants plan.
There's the.
It might have
West
been for
66
or
partnering.
TA. No,
It's partnering funds.
In the CIP.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing.
That's the only thing. in the
Yeah,
CIP.
okay.
My point is.
Yeah, when I go out to Public Works and I kind of look at that south side, it's gonna be a tough build in some locations.
So regardless of if it's north, south, what have you, will the 419 funds, in addition to everything else that's currently being proposed along the corridor, be able to be used for that if needed?
I think they're an eligible expense. How does this? Sorry, I think I've asked this question before. How does this trail align or not align with the AT&P in this corridor?
Sure, it doesn't.
Well,
Is it an
Well,
addition
towards
or
the north,
a
towards the,
substitution?
sorry, towards the
yeah.
west, it does.
So the AT&P actually calls for separated bike lanes
Okay,
between
That's right.
Woody Mountain and Woodlands Village. The section from Thompson to Woodlands Village has already been compromised, if you will, by virtue of development proposals.
been built. Mostly.
Yeah, I mean, and does not include separated bike lanes.
Correct, just bike lanes.
When we looked at this, the adjustments that we made were to one, look at an 11-foot trail, so that it could be converted to a 5-foot bike lane and 6-foot sidewalk.
Yes.
Okay. We also looked at locating it to the best of our ability, in a manner that still allows for widening. So you could build it now and widen the road and leave it in place. It would probably be a little more meandering as a result of that than a typical 5-foot parkway and then the facility. So we did our best to make sure that it could be, like I said, transitioned into the AT&P desired outcome. The discussion about north side, south side is who needs it first. There's current existing demand on the north side. And to Paul's comment about constructability, the north side has its issues as well. There's a very steep vertical slope that would require cutting into. And seemed it might be, in some ways, you've got issues on both sides, a little more functional on the south side. A couple reasons for that. Connections to the foots to the west, and the possibility of a foot to the east to Yale that would bring people all the way in to be able to access NAU better. So that was the discussion.
Is that a new piece too?
Yeah. The Woodlands to Yale, it would be a new piece not considered in the AT&P.
How high a priority were those on the AT&P, those separated bike
I
facilities?
don't recall offhand.
Okay. That helps, because if they're in the earlier priorities, then they have, in theory, funding in the 20-year program. If they're lower priority, right, they're not funded.
I do recall that they were in the priority 3 range, and then there were some
Unfunded.
parts that were developer dependent or something like
Okay,
that. That's
thanks.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Just skipping ahead to wrap up, because I know we took a little bit of time there. Just want to give you a project schedule update. Obviously, May, we're shooting to get these recommendations and phasing complete with our PAG. They're currently going through the document review process right now. So we feel confident that even before September, to bring it for you for formal approval, that we can hand it over to you all so you can start having, the internal conversations that y'all need to have. And then, of course, we'll bring that to the board as well for approval, given that we're the ones working on the plan. So we have our process to do as well. And I do have 2 more questions for you guys, but I'm going to reach out via email on those. Catch up with y'all later.
And maybe I'll say this for when you do that, but I think just one of the things, I hate to sound like a broken record, but what we're planning specifically is, and really it's traffic as well, and engineering, but part of my concern about that right away and just the edge improvements is how do we get it what's the expectation when development projects come in? Because the way this is going to be approved, we will not have the authority to point to this and say, you shall provide a setback or right away. So that's where my concerns lie, is how do we end up using this as a tool to help get what we need? So that can be part of the conversation. I would really appreciate it.
Can do. Thank you.
Okay. Switching between the agenda and the.
Handout. Okay, I'm here to talk about planning for programming. Scope refinement. Next slide, please. So the planning to programming is a ADOT process to nominate roadways on the ADOT system into their 5-year construction program. We will look at the current round that's due May 1st, fiscal year 27-31. And then we'll look at the other stuff, but we're here to look at our top project. Next slide, please. So in February, I want to remind you that we
MetroPlan and our advanced members chose top 7 projects in our region. They are listed on the right, and the nominations are due May 1st. And so we chose the number 1 project, US 180 corridor improvements, and we're here to talk scope refinement. Next slide, please. The corridor is about 17.4 miles from 66 to just past Snowball Road. Next slide, please. Okay, the resources that you have in front of you, you have a scope map and you have a P2P list. So the scope map is the corridor, the US 180 corridor master plan coming from ADOT. The highlights are confirmed priorities out of the ATMP, and anything in red are the other plans because this project lives in 5 of our plans. And then the second handout is the top 7 project detail. So this project has a bunch of components, and today we want to refine those components. So next slide, please. Okay, so the US 180 corridor master plan is the primary plan. Its goals is to address congestion and implement safe travel for all users. The table lists all the plans that this project is mentioned in, and really the heart of the scope is enhanced as a high visibility crosswalks in the form of enhanced crossings and pedestrian hybrid beacon. So we are going to talk about crossings versus beacons, the number of crossings and their priorities. And then at Forest Avenue, there is a question about the type of crossing that we wanted to talk about. Next slide, please. Okay, these are, so the US 180 corridor master plan does a no build plus recommended spot improvements. So here you see the rest of the spot improvements aside from the crossings that I just mentioned for a total cost of $8.6 million, which would be what we would nominate into the P2P process that's due May 1st. Next slide, please. So in the main scope document at the bottom, there is a disclaimer about warrants. So I wanted to just shout out the risk of the recommended crossings in the scope, potentially not meeting warrants, and seeing if that was a concern for y'all. Because at the end of the day, MetroPlan does recommend nominating the project in its entirety as listed, but I still wanted to see if the TAC had concerns about the warrant issue should we come upon that. You're smiling, Madam Chair.
I'm smiling because I feel like the warrant becomes because too many people are in a hurry. So I feel like you get in front of it before you get to warrants, but.
And the thought, you're doing great. And I think the thought there is don't preemptively remove them. It will this is nominating it in for design and engineering, and let design and engineering figure it out.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay, I will take your silence as complicity. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's clarify the scope. There's a couple of things to clarify here. So on Humphreys, there are 4 recommended high-vis crossing improvements on Route 66, Aspen, Birch, and Columbus. Then there is installing an enhanced pedestrian crosswalk at Elm per our regional transportation safety plan. And the second consideration for potential scope clarification is Forest Ave. So if you look on your big scope sheet on Forest Ave, there's 2 kind of conflicting recommendations, whether we do a pedestrian crossing hybrid beacon or installing an actual traffic signal. So our recommendation is to install a pedestrian hybrid beacon because of the great percentage of grade at Forest. It's super steep and not conducive to a traffic signal. So if we were to choose between signal versus pedestrian crossing hybrid beacon, we would recommend the hybrid beacon. What do y'all think?
The general, question on scope. You said the whole scope. But you're talking about the whole scope on your screen, not the whole scope from the corridor master plan. Because you're just picking and choosing pieces of the master plan.
Okay, let me clarify. This sheet has all the corridor US 180 master plan recommendations.
Yes.
Plus ATMP regional transportation safety plan, Flagstaff in motion, and the ADOT at SAP. So
Projects.
yes,
Yep.
so this project sheet has the whole kit and caboodle. And I'm just highlighting the potential conflicts and decision points out of the whole world of spot improvement.
But the $8 million would be for.
Yes, the $8 million.
Everything, and
Yes,
figure out the conflicts.
yes. Thank you, Jeff.
No, sorry.
Member Bowman. Yeah, so, so I guess I just picked out, Dave and I worked together to pick out what would be kind of the
I'm the only one, sorry.
only one what?
It wasn't tracking. Oh, yeah.
It's 3 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. It's tough times. So, yeah, so are we good? So our bottom line recommendation from MetroPlan is just to leave it as is with the 8.6 million with the whole kit and caboodle. But I wanted to highlight the Humphreys issue and the Forest Ave issue. Let's start with the easy one, Beacon versus Signal. Are we good with Beacon instead of Signal?
Madam Chair, if I can add a little bit to that, and Member Bauman may remember this. There was a study done where we looked at, I want to say,
We studied a signal.
half a dozen different alternatives at that intersection and decided none of them worked particularly safely or were prohibitively expensive.
Yes.
And so just leaving it as a stop sign was deemed best.
Yeah, so
Has anything changed?
the grade has not changed.
The hill will become less steep. Thanks, Dave.
Signal came from the RTSP, which if I remember correctly, we just kind of listed a bunch of stuff. They didn't really go into detail like
Did not do
other
a
studies.
Analysis other than looking at the crashes, and that was Signal fixed those crashes.
My opinion, you could scratch that one off.
So just go with the Beacon.
That's what I would do.
Thank you.
Now that I know the game, I'm ready.
Hey, great. And then Humphreys is an interesting one because it is a highly used thoroughfare with like the high school students, and there's a bunch of public comment. And so I just wanted to highlight the high vis crossing improvements versus enhancing the crosswalk at Elm. And we could certainly leave it all in there and see how it lands with ADOT.
The Elm Crossing is also focus of our staff are doing some study there now.
Okay,
So I think that's a good project. We've been working on that.
great. Okay. Yes, Kim. Sorry.
I was just gonna ask, are you looking at Elm or Dale?
I just asked.
Oh, you did? Oh,
I don't know exactly which one, but I know we're looking at
Why do you
one.
look at the notes?
They're right next to each other.
Elmage.
Elman,
I can look
that
it up.
works.
What it is. I don't.
It's not important. I was just curious. We can continue. You want me to go?
Sure.
Okay.
Next slide, please.
Go
Cool.
past
Yeah.
me from the bus stop.
Yeah, I just don't remember which one they're focusing on now.
No.
I'm excited that there's so much discussion about Humphrey.
I think it's Elm.
So, yeah, so we recommend, MetroPlan recommends, so the big scope sheet has the project detail. The P2P list has the cost broken out by plan. So MetroPlan, we recommend that we submit this project as is listed on the P2P list. So we welcome any thoughts, any feedback, or additional recommendations for the US 180 corridor improvement to be nominated on May 1st to ADOT. I will say that the reasoning, focusing on the number one project versus the other six, which are no less important, but the advanced committee did nominate the US 180 as the top project, and more effort will be made aside from nominating it into the P2P. There needs to be education for our electeds and our state board to really move this project through to get it funded. So do we agree with nominating it as is on the P2P list? Thank you. I got a yes from member Bowman. Thank you so much. And since we're in a hurry, so this is just discussion. We're not really recommending because we already did it. But, oh, okay, really?
No, you just did that really fast.
Real fast on the Humphreys, the last bullet there, to the left, turn lanes when ADOT reconstructed the bridge there. They made it wide enough so in the future, two left turn lanes could be added onto 66, with taking some of the city's frontage along 66 when some of that redevelopment happens. And there's also right of way in the parking lot that was established to help out with receiving lanes between 66 and Aspen.
Oh, right on. So then you're saying the last bullet, there's been movement on the scope sheet in the last bullet to accommodate for those changes?
There has been some movement on it. Nothing read in the last, 5 years or so? 5 years.
Good to know.
Yeah, probably it's better.
Yeah.
So until that corner parcel redevelops.
Yeah, that corner parcel is the redevelopment need in order to have two receiving lanes, the various.
RFP is out for that corner parcel. But not, I don't know if the corner parcel is included in that RFP,
The corner.
Are you looking for the housing?
The whole block.
the whole block.
The whole block is out.
Does it
I've
include,
heard rumors, I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either.
I know we were working, I know when I say we, the city was working on RFP, but I wasn't involved in it. I mean, I've recently seen it. I think it's economic vitality.
This isn't,
This is the only one that
oh,
we have right away.
sorry, yes, that's this, I've been really involved in that, yeah.
Okay.
We have a response to that. We're negotiating with the property owner. I'm sorry, I was.
Oh, and it-
Does this discussion result in a material change to the scope? Okay, okay,
Sorry.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm sorry, I was still
No,
somewhere else
this
on
is
one
meaty
eighty.
stuff.
I
I'm
was
so
not
glad there's
ready.
Okay, I want to talk to you about it.
Okay,
Yay. So looks like we are going to nominate the US 180 corridor project as is on the P2P list. Thank you very much. I do want to say what is currently in the FY 26 through 30 round. So please advance to the next slide. So this is right now, there's open public comment for the FY 26 through 30 tentative program. And public comment is due on May 23rd. And those are the ways to make public comment. And we wanted to highlight a project. Next slide, please. So there is a new project in our region, which is the widening of I-40 Phase 1 for $12.5 million. And it also is accompanied by a tech package along that same stretch of highway. So that's why I'm bringing it up, if you want to make public comment on that. Next slide, please. And then these are just the other projects in our region that are in the tentative FY 26 through 30 5-year construction program that will, on May 16th, the state board is welcoming public comment on that. And I think it's getting presented, the 26 through 30 5-year construction program at the June 21st state board meeting, and that is here in Flagstaff. So we have a pavement rehab on State Route 40B, and we have a bridge rehab at the Cosnino TI. Next slide.
Just note that your top graphic is highlighting I-40. It is on B-40.
Oh,
It is on 66 through 10.
thanks, Jeremy. And then maybe I think the tool in the.
It was, no, this was an error that was made on our side. It was
Yeah.
originally
So
listed.
I copy pasted the error.
It was originally
Hey.
listed as I-40,
Like you
but
tell
the start and stop cross streets don't make any sense. It
Thank
is-
you
it
for
is
pointing that
B40.
out. Next slide, please. And then the last one is Meteor Crater Rest Area Truck Parking. So that is the current program that's out for public comment. And just to close out, if you want to look at the remaining 2 through 7 projects, they are on your P2P list. And we do plan on submitting those to ADOT on May 1st. Thank you.
okay. We are at this, item 8, safe routes to school update. Cory.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is just for information and discussion. With the TA Safe Routes Engineering Project, the executive board did approve the contracts and we kicked off in March. We have negotiated our biweekly meeting schedule and I actually just received my first invoice today. Next slide. This is an example of the baseline data we've been collecting over most of the last year. And as you can see, individual single occupancy vehicles make up the vast majority of student transit to and from school. And that's an area we're really going to focus on. And having this data, we can see in the future how much we've moved the needle on this. Can I get the next slide? So we've also created a parent survey to gather information from parents and caregivers about their questions, concerns, ideas for their child's transit to school. It has gone live last month, and we are in the process of getting that also on Flagstaff Connect Flagstaff. And those preliminary results have shown a self-reporting of 93% single occupancy vehicle. So once again, that's our biggest concern, is trying to reduce that so we can reduce congestion. Can't speak of it. Not just congestion, but
The emissions?
emissions. Thank you. And also we'd like to, find ways to give kids more movement on their way to and from school. It just improves everything from their grades, their self-esteem, things like that. Next slide. We are also in the process of creating infographics to share with the schools and the school system, not just safe route options to get to school, but also tips about, safety, safe commutes and things like that, the benefits of exercise, biking, walking, things like that. Next slide. So this is we're combining what you see here with mapping on the right, and then on the left, we will have those safety tips. And we haven't finished ours yet, but we're hoping to have that finalized this month. And then here we've been coordinating with the city and the school district to bring our expertise into the development of these new schools being constructed, and just offering our advice on how those plans could better meet safe routes to school goals. So we've met about the new Kinsey School a couple times. And then we have a good relationship. So going forward, any new constructions, we're really looking forward to being on the team in the development phase of those schools. And next, and that's it.
You can get to build that sidewalk.
Yeah, I was just saying, have they been, school's been receptive to your comments or discussions?
How would you answer that? I can't remember.
Have you seen the plans change?
All you needed is a pause and that pretty much, so.
Everyone is
Trying.
hesitant to make definitive statements at this point.
We'll keep trying. Makes a lot of sense there.
Yeah, schools are a tough one.
Showing everybody's driving to them now.
Your only choice at Kinsey right now, the new Kinsey,
Okay,
be able to get there by.
all right. Any other comments, questions on this before we move on to trip diary results?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. Questions?
Okay, go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So some changes, we do this every 6 years. And so the last one was 2018. So what were and the previous ones in 12 and 2006 all followed the same format. So what were the changes this year? We shifted to an online data collection. There were mailed letters, and then they were prompted to go to a website, register, and then they were randomly signed travel diary day, and everything else were received via email. We added some post-COVID-19 survey questions about telework, and added a question about exercise and recreation trips, which had some influence on the results. There are also enhanced reminders where a lot of emails went out, as you can see here, where in 2018, you got a postcard reminding you, please fill out your form. So it was fairly effective. Next slide, please. So the survey was conducted between late September, early November. over 9,000 households were eventually reached, 5,000 through our random sample address-based sampling, 1,000 NAU students, and then the convenience sample using the community forum participants, which is I think about 3,500 people at the time. So we got 750 more or less to sign up, and a little more than half of those completed the survey, which was a response rate of 5%. This is lower than we had in 2018, but we actually had more responses. I think 2018 was probably less than 350 responses. So next slide, please. In order to get the returns to match the population demographics, weighting takes place. We use the same method. We were a little more successful in oversampling NAU students and the Hispanic population this time. I expressed concerns about the convenience sample. At times, we feel like, it's heavily bicycle influenced, a lot of zealous people signed up. But when we looked at the demographics of those who participated, compared very favorably to the random sample. And in fact, the questions about mode use was actually the convenience sample was slightly less than the random sample in terms of bicycle usage. So feel fairly comfortable that the inclusion of that convenience sample is not compromising the integrity of the things. Weather was nice. It was nice in 2006, 2012. It was cold and wet and windy in 2018. So in terms of, as we compare trends, something to consider. Next slide, please. So we did see a big increase in walking share. You can see on the left, actually, excuse me, went from 11, almost 12%, almost 23%. Why? It's like, and there's a number of factors that we think are at play here. One is people could actually record their trips on a mobile device. They didn't have to go home and then think about what trip should I make and record them on a piece of paper or whatever. And so between that ease and then asking people to record recreational trips, we think walking and biking, got a big boost. Then also post-COVID, 2018 was pre-COVID, this was post-COVID. There's as you'll see, a lot more flexibility in time. And so we think people are actually out walking more for recreational purposes. You can see on the right, in terms of modal share, there's kind of this seesaw back and forth between single occupancy vehicles and multi-occupancy vehicles over time. But you can see for the other modes, they're relatively flat in terms of the miles traveled. Not really sure I understand why that seesawing takes back and forth. But I will say that we're talking about 450 samples. And when you start slicing these up by multiple modes and multiple trip purposes, it only takes a few trips to really swing things one way or the other. Down at the bottom, you can see these kind of trips per day and how those are reporting. You can see that's a pretty important jump from 0.6 to 1 trips per person today for walking, and a pretty important shift down for SOV. So I think there's some reality to some of these trends and not just the methods. So next slide. We can see the mode share. So geography still, we've seen this time and again in our surveys, geography matters. So downtown in the core, you can see that kind of map extends from the hospital down to I-40 essentially. Heavy multimodal use. We have more density there, more multimodal services, and that decreases as you go out. You can see some of those trends in walking in the top right, in the core of Flagstaff. That's really where we saw this big bump, and want to understand that a little bit more. From 2018 to 2024, transit saw a big bump. One of the suspicions is our success in oversampling of NAU. We have a lot of it, NAU trip riders, so that might have skewed some things there. Next slide, looking at the time, trying to get through there. Commute share, for a single occupancy vehicle is down. And it's down pretty importantly from 67 down to 62%. It's a pretty big drop, and you can see they kind of drop over time. So, you know, who's picking up the slack in that commute? We see transit, all three modes, with slight bumps up. And we'll throw MOB trips in there too. Need to do a little more research into why average trip length is up. Pretty strong, but you can see in previous years, it might be more important that it's why was it down in 2018? Trip time on the commute is staying relatively flat, but we can see speeds steadily decreasing over time in terms of average miles per hour. Mobility limitations are coming into play. Next slide, please. Flex time, work from home is up. Don't really have the trend, but you can see the table on the left, third line down, 19% of people were telecommuting on that day to work. And then you can see, you know, commute status in 24, about maybe can't see, but about I think it's 13% almost were telecommuting. And then you can see the span of trip distribution in terms of the days of week that people are working and flying. So getting some new information on work from home. Next slide, please. Deliveries are up quite a lot. You can see that top right, you know, how many people received a delivery? It was 3%, and now it's up to 19%. And whether it's substituted for trips, you know, was around 40%. Now it's at 75%. So again, figuring out how to account for that in, you know, transportation planning is something that we'll be contemplating over time. Next slide. This one I thought was very interesting. Satisfaction is running downward. And, you know, at first blush, you might say, well, you know, things shift back and forth. But then when you look at the questions on, you know, how people respond to all these different aspects of the transportation system, most of them, especially over the last 3 cycles, are on a downward trend. There's a couple of exceptions for the condition of streets and traffic flow are as relatively flat or slightly improved. But I think the chart on the right, the graph on the right, may be informing the graph on the left, and something we want to keep our eye on in terms of satisfaction with our transportation system. Yeah, next slide. School trips, Corey and Kim will be very interested in this, but it basically validates what they're seeing in the field. I won't go into the details. Next slide. So next steps, you know, puzzling through all those things, you know, for use in the model and other places. Want to continue to share the use for travel demand management safe routes. And what we've done is shifted the next one. We're planning to do the next one in 5 years instead of 6. So that way we're no longer doing this, you know, every other cycle on a presidential election cycle. Suspect that, you know, when people are getting surveys every 10 minutes, this one didn't register very well. Another important thing is the budget. West Group did the work for us. We kind of negotiated up to $59,000, and they actually tracked their actual costs. We didn't pay more than 59, but they said, look, the level of work in terms of the extra handling and stuff probably ran closer to 75. So we'll be trying to accommodate that in future budgets. Any questions?
We're gonna be redoing the foot trails this summer. So some of them are in pretty bad shape, so.
Hopefully we see an uptick in 5
Yeah,
years when we
that's
do
good.
this again.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent, thank you.
Yeah.
Any questions or comments? Hey, Kate, can you blast through the
Oh,
flag?
I can blast through it. I'm not even gonna read it. The happenings report is in your packet and you can let us know if you have any questions on it.
I asked Dave what you recognized for.
For my excellent service on policy.
Congratulations.
I think there's a couple final
Yes.
closing business items.
So items from the TAC, do we have anything for discussion? Okay. We got the next scheduled meeting, May 21st, 2025. So see you guys next month. Well, I won't, but Nate will. Thank you, Nate.
No problem.
And then it is 3:29 and we're gonna adjourn.
So thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
For having the team.
Yeah.
Thanks online.
So I was falsely accusing you